L'année, que nous vous souhaitons bonne. Et on accueille ce soir Lisa Robertson et Anne Portugal. C'est Lisa Robertson qui va lire en premier, elle sera traduite par Abigail. Et c'est la seconde fois que Lisa Robertson lit pour double change. Elle a récemment publié Hours Boat et Lisa Robertson Magenta Soul Whip et un livre d'essai Nilling dont le titre est Nilling, paraîtra cette année. Et après avoir passé 3 ans en Californie, Lisa vit actuellement en France. Voilà, on va entendre ce dialogue de traduction.
On va d'abord lire à deux un poème qui s'intitule A Coat. Et c'est un poème en 8 sections. Et on lira chacun à notre tour une section, moi en français, Lisa en anglais. Je vais commencer. Un habit. Une douzaine de montres, des mètres de toile, des tonnes de fer, du cirage, de la soie ou de l'or, une table, une maison, du fil. Un habit et 10 mètres de toile. Fer, toile, froment. 20 mètres de toile et un habit. La valeur de la toile et la valeur de l'habit. L'habit est immédiatement avec la toile, tel que la toile le fait apparaître.
The coat takes the position, such as a coat or maize or iron, etc., linen, etc., 20 yards of linen or one coat. One coat, for example. One coat varies. The coat equated with the linen, worth one coat, in one coat, in 20 yards of linen, in which the coat is the linen, and the linen looks like the coat. Its buttoned-up appearance as a thing, the equivalent of the linen, instead of the coat.
Ainsi vêtu, j'ai cherché autour de moi quelque chose dont on pourrait former de la matière. Méchanceté morale, chasteté, suicide, connaissance de la littérature, poésie, arnaque, nourriture, concubinage, usure, roi, liberté, jeu, guerre, peste. J'ai fait une liste de ces choses, c'est-à-dire rien d'autre que le corps vivant, bilieux, abdiquant, débordant, avec les flaques de bile qui luisent au sol dans le théâtre d'opération, sous les lampes bleues célestes. Parfois simplement ces lois, puisque nulle communauté n'est pour un corps, donc la proposition.
But I think poetry is nice because of my body. The insurrection of my unplaced body, I mean, on the sodden space of groaning porch. So, as a clothier, I must ask, what kind of unlikely coat is cut from 20 yards of linen? And the enjoyable gland also dribbles the politics for its friend.
La forme équivalente d'un corps n'implique pas que la magnitude de sa valeur peut être déterminée, car le corps de l'ami est uniquement spacieux, et ainsi éteint toutes les marchandises nommées. Au lieu d'échanger, je serai son dessinateur Girard, et rien de plus. Nos propres relations partent et cousent d'un mouvement pareil à une circulation, glissant et collant avec le plaisir d'un fraîchissement. Il est incroyable qu'il soit si difficile de simplement connaître sa spaciosité, spacieuse comme Balenciaga, je dirais, et donc sans équivalent. Robante, elle se tient tout simplement seule et fait signe, comme le ferait l'énorme habit marxien, moins la certitude. Elle paraît incroyable et luxueuse, comme dans le geste récepteur de fréquence et non abstrait du commencement.
When you proceed to measure a person, first request her to button her coat, that you may better discern her shape and position. Then place the end of the measure to the top of the back seam or where you intend the top of the back seam to be and extend it to the required length of the waist, say 16 inches. Continue it to the length at bottom, say 36 inches. Next, require the person to bend her arm while you take the length of the sleeve from the back seam to the elbow, 19 inches, and from the elbow to the hand, making 33 inches. Then take the length of the lapel by placing the measure at the top of the back seam and pass it over the breast to the length required at front, 21 inches. Then take the size of the breast, 18 inches, and the belly, 16.5 inches, the top of the arm, 7 inches below the elbow, 6 inches at the hand, 5 inches. The sides of the sleeve are taken 2 inches from the top of the forearm seam, 2 inches below the elbow, and the same distance from the bottom.
C'est pourquoi la communauté est un mécanisme qui, après avoir été mis en mouvement, opère avec son objectif un simulacre échangeable, dont les composantes font le cliquetis limpide de la valeur, comme l'eau le long d'une pente, comme moulin au vent, et ne cesse de changer sa forme. Au-delà des mouvements inévitablement insurrectionnels de corps spécifiques, parfumables et raffinés comme le sien, et n'élimine pas la contradiction transcendante, comme une machine à une histoire amère, ils appâtent avec du miel, car les corps ne disparaissent pas, mais cela arrive. Tout doré, snob, tremblant, triste, comme dans les théâtres nous voyons et profondément déployons amitié et inimitié. Quand l'image est-elle devenue une machine? Avant, lorsqu'elle était préposition, entièrement émancipée en tant que libre mouvement externe, entre d'opportuns corps adjectivaux, liés par des postures mouvantes, elle subsistera invisible, en dehors du circuit et de ses étapes. Il nous faut conclure qu'il n'y a pas d'image, que le corps de l'ami parle par sa bouche, en tant que mouvement transcendant, succulent. Ce que le politique lui sera ne peut être limité. Il n'y a qu'un corps, là où il y a mon ami sous la véranda. Épouvanté, je sais que c'est le cas, parce qu'il n'y a nul corps général sous la véranda, il n'y a nul corps général dans la voiture, nul ami général.
A green dress coat cut very scantily with very narrow lapels. The sleeves very large at top and tight in the arms. The shoulders very narrow. The collar of velvet ascends very high on the neck and the crease rolls over like a horse collar. Flaps are worn at the waist. The cut is cut across the waist. It is a new system of cutting. A waistcoat of white marcella, single-breasted with a stand-up collar. A blue dress coat with gilt buttons and velvet collar. A fancy undervest with a blue undervest. A green dress coat with a fancy velvet vest and a blue undervest. A wide French braid down the front edges around the collar with 5 volutes of braid down each side of the breast. Double-breasted frock cut quite plain except for the lapels and the collar. 6 buttons down each lapel, the collar short and buttoned up under the chin. Thank you, Abigail. Wooden houses. A work called Wooden Houses begins. It explores different degrees of fear. And it is curious that you did not choose a secular image. Augustine's own task was equally impossible. And we said a boat would come and take you to Venice. And you are a law of language. And my mouth took part. And we fed you morphine mixed with honey. And you are a rare modern painting in the Grand Salon. And you are a wall of earth. And you are in ideological calm, and you are flung out to search. And you are framed only by the perspectival rigors of masonry, and you are not a neutral instrument. And you are pornographic, and you are the imagination of society as a tree. And you are the kneeling woman who expresses some alarm. The woman looks somewhat apprehensively at the viewer. And you are the pronoun of love, scorn, accusation, glamour. Everything you know about the animal pertains to the riot of love. And you are Torontos of cold trees, where erupts the morning's catalogue. And you did not die outside of love, and you do not judge. And you roll down scrabbling at its glaze. The man on the right runs away terrified. And you see how an animal dies, giving first a drop of voluptuousness. And you seem to pour rose water, leaning on trees for rest. And you speak in leaves to flirt and fight and appease. And you turn into a her, not knowing what's happening. The woman in your midst may be kneeling or seated or may simply be drawn out of scale. And you are the last wooden house. The carved frame includes the heads of dogs. And you will not die, but chance is always a little ahead. And your failure is my tongue. The dramatic effect is heightened by the bright red ground showing through the top layers. And your heart broke off into this great desire to see, into the tall grass. And your plump arms emerge from the gold and rose-pink folds of your tunics, as in the ancient literary genres. Because it is a known fact, the wounded fall towards the point. Because of mute desire, you are the teak pavilion. Because you wanted to be flattered, you are portrayed as the sea goddess Thetis with 2 of her 5 sons. Chance is always a little ahead, but not under circumstances of its own choosing. Emptying your apartment during the season of apricots, this wasn't true. Genial, then light, I tell mine complaint. I tell mine complaint. I took part in the savage transaction. It burns to come back to you. It is pure surface. It pushes straight towards the author of its hurt. It was 3:04 a.m., like you invented summer in a text I discovered in your drawer in the summer of 1998. Or a woman whose complete being seems to sing sex one man shows his companion. Sometimes the most ample designations are so stifling you can only go further inside, supposing a designation to have an interior. The fabric is knotted to reveal your figure. The folds suggest the roundness of a young girl. The tissue is syllables and dreams in a distant colony. The parts of life are not happening in tandem. Then it is summer. This material is reconciled to chance, which is spacious. To make livid a philosophy, we helped you leave breath. Whether love comes as a young boy with girlish limbs, you are behind and between Christ and the adulteress, witnessing. You are buckled into my truth. A young woman looks openly out of the picture. You are the claustrophobia of the image. At its peak, a couple stare at the lightning-filled sky. You are the exhausting pace of boredom versus the use of the body. You are the next cabin also. The figures represent the 4 ages of man. You call this passivity. You left the books that had surrounded you and me holding your body, accompanied by the city. You lie there wounded. You see the precision of the distant city through the round arches of the bridge. You see the women's thick hair bound with colored ribbons, their complicated sandals and the sprigs of olive. You thrum and click. You took part in the savage transaction of negation. You are wooden houses transformed into apartments and restaurants. Your breath thrummed the wooden house. Your failures are no longer sacred. A cuff. It is always the wrong linguistic moment. So how can I speak of sex? One's own places realism in doubt. But now I want only the discretion of realism. I can't say it any more clearly than this. Philosophers taught me a conversion narrative, how the four elements change into each other by flattering. I think of them or meet with them in reading. On October 2nd, showing their vanity and falsehood with the frontispiece of him in laurel crown. The room runs to swags and popular flower pornography. The house amplifies the trembling as if its inhabitants are lodged in an ear. To make something from what I am, from proximity, bitterness, is just brutal. So I turn to syllables. And if I degenerate into style, it's because I love it very much. All week long, like a first thing, like a technique or a marriage where conditions are incomprehensible. Thus, satisfying the narrative of the body, intentionally tawdry and valueless. And this is a recurrent pleasure because it gushes, it's painterly. So that I feel abstraction is an incomplete resistance. There are explosions of innovation next a strange, gilded and embalmed repose. A single leaf laid out the circumstances of its development. So I attended vegetation, where ornament is always unfinished. And it was a purely melancholic ritual. A fragrance so unexpected emanated from the document, only to give rise to the striated ruin. Some terrible object presented to it, dispersed over all the parts, which are like nature, miming the human. Painting can be seen as a faltering of that gradient, if faltering begins the ordinary. Discontinuity, seepage, and the obedient will sit in the familiar light of the person without being specifically summoned. The models, the furniture, the clothes are all real. I worked in the kitchen with the windows open so I could hear you, and change broke my heart. Their hands are love and their faces are love and disturbance. What you see and hear in the present is emotion. We live beyond its limits. The body bandaged to make it more impermeable, then folded again along the top in a deep cuff. It is 1881. It is Athens. It is Shelley's pyre. It is not his pyre, it is his boat. It is commodious and utterly dark. It is the camera's movement blocked. It is a non-productive economy, but it does not deny the socius. It thinks only for inconspicuousness. It is only the king. It hardly ever results from choice. It masks an entire incompatibility using cloth or cuisine. It needs some sort of sacrament or corrosive. It makes use of an effacement. What if it is just angry? If females lick language, death, economy, cold sky with flat gray storm clouds, the seaport at sunset, tubes of yellow light. This suture is a form of will. Furthermore, the paradise is only ever indexical. Above the flat roof of the warehouse called Modern Props, 5:30 in the afternoon, I'm about to copy this out because of having refused to break with the tradition of myself. After the recorder is switched on and before I begin to speak, all privacy rubs on it. One's strange bare body needs a party dress. Tyrant body, if it travels, came into the room as a document. Now these rites have to become intelligible and wet the shining Babylonian coverlet. It charms impotently like a dialect where all the leaves are an opera, silky things with fringes flung on the furniture, a sort of clown of the feminine, with the head of a nocturnal bird as an uneven survival. Uneven survival. Another maudlin dialectic, billowing skirt over modern corset, by which I am strengthened with luminous modulation, and outside the window, the beautiful Socius in labeled packages with ship gray trim. Then, with a thorough exploration of those parameters, with instruments made from negation in the assimilating person, in a pronoun that absorbs everything, we have laid in the vocables of the not yet feminine. For a whole sentence at a time, I become the world with its interiors, streets, railroad stations, restaurants, sports cars, and beaches, if only in some minor respect. Labor was meant to be extricated from these things, the philosophical project of happiness, approached, pressed against, touched, motionless in the sun. I wished to pass scrupulously through myself with subtle stamina. The ceremonies took place not to be redeemed. They elaborate one another. A work acts out the severance. There exists a labor towards nothing, nothing being some kind of sacrament or corrosive. 12:30 p.m. Monday, at the beginning of a new series, just after church bells. I am too slow without you, neither public nor private, but nearly invisible, seen on a curved stairway from above, repeated slowly and formally in a dream. Bathers went to and fro through this flower-lined passage. So I pass from institution to intuition, feeling sad spiritual pressures on the left of my skull. The order seen one night lifts, swings onwards in winter light. As for us, we are uncertain people, exploiting mythology in dirty, olden sea. To and fro through this flower-lined passage, I slipped across codes using rose thorns to indicate an idea about embodiedness by slowing down the causal interval. The idea of the indexical is pleasantly estranged, dissolved in the memory of matter, such as the beige buildings of anywhere. This is the erotic feeling of non-identity. Suddenly the horizon folds. The biggest problem with melancholy is that it is more detailed than the world. Now it has spoken in me to become what I will be. Then I would enter the discipline of failure, and at the same time to be disinterested. I think a melting bell is silence. I mean something like this. The world already differs, and astonishment has caused me shame. Whatever listening is to someone, let it be valued according to its weakness, to a null function, for the size and yield of its fruit, its surface of variability, and concision and resilience. We manipulate memory to make things free. I say pricked through, but I also mean an inflation of monochromy as a skeptical technique, which plays out its tensions and conflicts as endurers melancholia. In a finely textured conundrum, I met with the resistance that seeing cleaves. This is to say that labor can move also towards the single blindness I love. What people do is passionate, seen, and dominated. Now I feel like I'm that person, perceiving from a house in progress, to go to the room where life falters, everything heavy and mortal, Plato, Plutarch, Macrobius, Lactanius, and others, sleep in the capacious singular. I too am cautious. The soul hormone turns the japonica dark. Between stability and volition, full-blown in the first moments of waking, the action of the sounds comes clear. It's like this: the non-identity of servitude, the part that makes its own use of an effacement, won't ever be revealed. What did radio and the phonograph give? The turn of the phonograph could forget about government, all these times and devices of significant imprecision. How does the language receive us? It receives us like a surly host, by slow consumptions. Now we run our fingers, quick and innocuous, in the proper order and sequence and from the beginning, between the telling and distant objects, because of my body, in the absence of a system. It is both in ruins and still under construction. And if I become unintelligible to myself because of having refused to believe, I transcribe a substitution like the accidental folds of a scarf. From these folds, I make persons, perfect marriage of accident and need. And if I become unintelligible to myself because of having refused to need, I transcribe a substitution to lose the unattainable. Like the negligent fall of a scarf, now I occupy the design. Thank you.